I saw a personality with horns bump into me it shook me like physically in real
Felt it.
life. I felt it, my hand like bumped me. Something came, she could hear the footsteps, came to where she was on the bed and started whispering like gibberish inside her ear. She could hear the voice. A third time, she saw a silhouette sitting by her on the bed and rubbing. So I was taken somewhere as a child. I remember being put in some kind of big basin and I was being birthed with some brownish liquid.
Wow.
So I was upstairs in my room lying down. I heard someone walk into my room. I thought it was one of my children, so I didn't look. I was lying down in bed and then all of a sudden there was something heavy breathing at the back of my neck.
Wow.
And then it occurred to me that it was not my children.
One of your other daughters had another experience. You want to describe what that was about?
One of them had a self-deliverance experience.
Hello viewers and welcome to a new series from the Beneath the Surface podcast titled Supernatural Stories, where we're going to be looking at extraordinary stories from ordinary people, and we're going to be looking at their real experiences and how they interact with the supernatural realm, how they overcame spiritual challenges and oppression through the word and through prayer. And today I have a guest, and my guest will remain anonymous, but we will hear their story, and I believe it will resonate with a lot of people. Now, in the past, we have on this podcast spoken with or interviewed, people who are notable, and I will call them people who, in a sense, speak from the pulpit. Today, we're going to be looking at the stories of people who sit in the pews. And today we have a great guest, someone who's close and dear to my heart. And I'll start by asking you to introduce yourself.
I am a 52-year-old woman, married woman with children, and I'm a healthcare professional.
Good. And how long have you been in my ministry for? Because you happen to be in my ministry.
About 15 years.
Okay. So I remember when you first came, you actually, you were brought here, I believe, by your husband, and you'd been attending the church for a bit. I believe you came to the church almost reluctantly because you were very planted in your church, your former church, you were very committed. But for whatever reason, your husband thought, you should be a part of this church. And you started attending. And then I remember a particular incident which sort of kind of like changed the story or turned the tide. I remember maybe 2-3 months into your, coming to the church, I had a dream and I came to church. During this service, I remember the dream. And while I was ministering, I asked you to come out and I began to prophesy based on the dream. And I asked the question, I said, do you have any connection with Cotonou? And the reason why I asked the question was because I knew you were from a place, you come from a place, at least your parents, called Ondo in the southwest part of Nigeria. Your husband comes from Ondo in southwest Nigeria as well. And I had this dream where I saw myself being taken to a place called Cotonou, which is in the Republic of Benin. And I was taken to a particular, odd land, and I saw somebody digging up a grave and burying some animals. And this person happened to be, connected with your family. And I thought to myself, and I asked you, what do you have to do with Cotonou? And then I remember, what was your response?
My response was that my maternal side, yes, half of my maternal side is from Cotonou.
Okay, so that means your mother's mother is from Cotonou.
Mother's mother, yes.
Mother's mother. And that was where the story took an interesting turn, because here I'd only just kind of like known you for 3 or so months, and then God was revealing some things, to me about you. And then I remember, the next scene was that, if I remember well, I had another dream, And during the service again, a prophetic service, while I was ministering, I called you out, and then I saw I had seen something about your daughter. You know, I saw her fall into a bush, and then there were thorns kind of like pierced her skin. And the Lord told me to tell you that it was not, I didn't know what was going on, but that whatever it was, that it was not ordinary, that it was actually a spiritual attack. Do you want to tell us about that experience? What happened there?
What actually happened the week before had been the fun day in the church, and my daughter was on the bouncing castle with other children, just jumping as
About how old was she at the time?
she was about 5,
Wow.
I believe. She was jumping with other children, and all of a sudden, she ended up outside of the bouncing castle in the bush at the back, and the thorns actually caught her skin. They had to really pick gently to bring her out, and then they brought her to me. And yeah, we were kind of looking after her, and there was a particular deep one behind her deep wound.
Wow.
And we were nursing that. Let me go on to tell you after that. At the time you gave the prophecy, quite a few of us knew that she fell in the bush during the fun day. But in the week following, the wounds started to go in a different direction. They became like more sore, but then her eyes started to come out with this whitish liquid, and she became very ill. And then I had to send an email to you to let you know that, because during the prophecy you said it was an assignment, a demonic assignment, and we needed to pray. And so now that she felt very ill, I now had to send you a message that, okay, it was more than ordinary.
Wow. So in many senses, I mean, many times people ask the question that, how do you know that something is a medical situation, a logical, natural medical situation versus when it's a spiritual situation? In this instance, God revealed it, to me, your pastor, by a dream, which is what you call discerning of spirits. But then I also remember another important account, and this actually happened, I believe, soon after I had the dream about you having a connection with Cotonou. I remember you were in church, and at a prophetic ministration, I saw a revelation where I saw you being taken somewhere as a child, and I just began to say, I saw you being taken somewhere as a child, and then you said to me that, oh, you had an experience which you forgot. You want to tell us a bit about that?
That particular incident had been taken somewhere as a child, but I had no recollection of it. I always say I have some type of blockage where there's some years of my life that I can't remember. But when you gave that word, I suddenly had almost like a revelation, a vision of where I was taken to and what happened and the words that I said after. And yes, so I was taken somewhere as a child. I remember being put in some kind of big basin, and I was being birthed with some brownish liquid.
Wow.
And I don't know, but from leaving that place, I don't believe I was meant to remember, because when I left there, it's almost like I fell asleep. And then I woke up. I have like missing parts of my life, and I woke up like sometime later.
Now, I mean, it's interesting you say that, because some people have, recounted experiences, like that, whereby, something happened to them and there was a blank in their memory for years. And then maybe during a prayer meeting, it comes back again. And what I believe happens with those kind of things is that, for some people, maybe when they were young, they were taken to certain places, a ritual was done. Sometimes whoever is doing the ritual is saying maybe it's for protection or whatever it is. But they don't know that, with the devil, the blessings of the Lord makes rich and adds no sorrow. When the devil blesses you, it always comes with consequences and sorrow. And what they usually tend to do is they cast a spell And that spell is supposed to, the person is bewitched, to, in a sense, kind of blur or remove the memory of that thing, so that the person doesn't remember. And you coming in contact with a ministry, a prayer ministry like this, in a prayer ministry that believes in the supernatural fire is released. And what it does is that it exposes things. The prophetic exposes things. So that brought, that particular encounter back to memory. And then you've had quite a few, I mean, you've been in the ministry for close to 14 or so odd years. You've had quite a few experiences. There was one particular one. In fact, you seem to be one person that, in almost every other meeting, there's you have an encounter, an experience. You seem to be favored, as such. But I remember there was one particular one. I called a name, and you initially did not come up because it was like a nickname, and I called it again. Then eventually, you came forward and said you believe it's your daughter, because I said I mentioned the name, and then I see a darkness over this child, and that it is demonic, and that it's something that needs to be addressed in the spirit. And so you then told me, I don't know if it was then or sometime later, what exactly was the experience about?
I had called my daughter to pray for her and just...
Where was your daughter?
She was in university.
Okay.
Tell her about, just to pray for her concerning what you'd said. And then she told me that a few nights before...
Okay, so when I said this, you were here in London.
Yes.
And you were not aware that...
that anything had happened, yes. Then I called her, and then she explained to me that 2 nights before, she actually didn't report it because she didn't know what it was. She probably thought there was something wrong with her mind. She'd heard the door to her room open. She was in bed, but she knew that she locked her door because she was going to sleep. And she could hear footsteps in her room. And so she was on her bed and just froze there. Something came, she could hear the footsteps, came to where she was on the bed and started whispering like gibberish inside her ear. She could hear the voice. And of course, because...
Was she asleep on the bed, or what was she doing?
No, she was lying down, trying to fall asleep when this happened. And so she remembered, something you say about quietening a voice that is not a voice of God, and, bringing it under the authority of Jesus. And she said, she told the voice, I silence you in the name of Jesus. You are not of God. Don't speak to my ears. And then it stopped. So when I called her, she reported that. And then I told you, and you said to bring her for prayers. But subsequently, the thing came to her again.
Before she came for prayers?
After she came for prayers.
Okay.
So I guess it came again. But this time around, it came. I think there was something about, I don't want to use the word stubborn, but I think I understand.
Yes.
It came to her again, and then it came, the whispers, and then it came in human form. She could see.
Okay, so it came the first time while she was at uni?
Yes.
Came a second time again, whispering.
Whispering.
And what did he say in the whisper?
It's just gibberish, like just whispering, like confusion, just whispering into someone's ear.
Okay.
But then it came, a third time, she saw a silhouette sitting by her on the bed, hand rubbing. But by that time, you told us the strategy of how to pray.
Okay.
So we prayed, and that was the last time she saw it. But so that I believe, so that I understand what she was seeing, it then came to me.
Wow.
In a room in the house. So I was upstairs in my room lying down. I heard someone walk into my room. I thought it was one of my children, so I didn't look. I was lying down in bed, and then all of a sudden there was something heavy breathing at the back of my neck.
Wow.
And then it occurred to me that it was not my children, any of my children, and then I started to pray. And that was the last we saw it.
So you said something about a strategy, but before we say that, I mean, first of all, just to reiterate and clarify, this thing started attacking or coming to your daughter at uni.
Yes.
It was picked up prophetically.
Yes.
Before it was actually mentioned to you.
Yes.
You called your sister and she confirmed that she had had this experience. It was strange, but she thought it was her mind. And it came again, and she rebuked it and told it to go. And it came again when she was at home. She had that experience again. And then the thing also, and when it came this time, it came almost like in a physical form. She saw the form and it did the same thing and it was stroking her. And then you also had the same experience and then you rebuked it. I mean, from what you've described, I can almost say that that's what you call a familiar spirit. It's a spirit that is familiar with the family and felt or feels that he had a right to your daughter's life and also a right to your life. I mean, I've had a similar experience, where I had a dream and something came to me in the dream. I was trying to rub against me and I dealt with it, with authority. And then a day or two later, my son tells me, "Oh, Dad, I had this dream, blah, blah, blah." And it came in exactly the same form. So when those kind of things happen, it's clear that, there's something, that feels akin to you or has a right to that family. And thank God for prayer and spiritual authority. So after that, did you see that? Did that thing feature again?
No.
Okay, interesting, very, very interesting. And it seemed like as though you have a few children, and each of them, you seem to have peculiar spiritual experiences, individual ones. Before, we can almost say that, well, like you usually say that, before you joined the church, it seemed like as though your life was peaceful. You had no issues. Everything seemed hunky-dory. The truth of the matter is that there were things happening beneath the surface, like the podcast is called, pun not intended. But there were things happening beneath the surface that, you're coming into this church and this ministry. It's almost like as though a light shone and exposed those things underneath the surface. So I think one of your other daughters had another experience.
Yes.
You want to describe what that was about?
One of them had a self-deliverance experience.
Okay.
And just like you said, just going about usual, not knowing that there was anything, happening around her life. But she'd been attending, we'd been attending a lot of breakthrough programs. It was just a season of a lot of prayers, high season of prayers. And she was keen into it. And then one morning, it was a weekend actually, she was worshiping and praying. And then all of a sudden, there was commotion.
Wow.
There was commotion, in the house. And went there, she would stretch, and it's like she would open her mouth.
So when you say with, as in she was crawling on the floor like a snake,
Yeah.
was she by herself?
She was by herself before myself and another child of mine ran upstairs to meet her.
You heard some noise.
Yes, you could hear commotion. I think my daughter got to her first and then was calling mom. And so I came. Anyway, and then she was stretched like she was expelling something. Then she couldn't speak. And that would go on for a while. And then she would relax. And then we're praying. And then it would start again. And that happened, to be honest, it happened over 2 days.
Wow.
It happened over 2 days. I remember, at some point I had to call another pastor in the church as well, just, to say this was happening. But it happened over 2 days. And by God's grace, it happened that day. We prayed, we did what we could. But then I told you about it. I guess there were still remnants. I guess that's how far our authority went. You then just wanted to say a usual prayer for the family in the church open foyer. But as soon as you laid hands and you started to pray, it all started.
I remember the experience. It was actually after church. Most people had gone, and it was yourself and 2 of your daughters, and I think your son or some. And I actually hadn't laid hands. I just said, let's bow our heads to pray. And 2 or 3 of you just began to just manifest. It was the craziest experience I'd ever seen, because, and what actually happened, it was almost like as though both of you were collapsing, and it felt like as though you were dead. So, if I did not know, if in a sense, in quote, I was a novice, I would have thought, call the ambulance, because both of you look lifeless. So we continued praying, and over time, I mean, we had to change our strategy. I had to, ask you to do certain prayers and all of that, and then, we thank God. So what happened after that?
After that, things got better. There was one time you said we should fast for a period, and so she was fasting. Yes. And then all of a sudden she had this experience again during the fast. But I remember we called an ambulance, nothing medical. They could not find anything. And I remember that my daughter kept saying, Mom, focus. And even the person who was having the experience was saying to me, Mom, they're not going to find anything. I know what this is. It's spiritual. She was so confident. And I think God just wanted to show us, because the medical did everything and they just couldn't find anything. And they said unexplainable causes. And that was.
I think it's important to say something here, because, like you said at the beginning, you're actually a medical professional, the health professional. I am a medical person. So we are not saying that every time you have an incident, it is spiritual. So we must first explore what is the logical and natural. But with this one, it was clear. This was in the church for a year, everything was fine. And then you started to, for want of a better word, collapse and almost look like you were dead. And, what kind of medical ailment will suddenly come upon both daughter and child? And so clearly, when it's a strange phenomenon, one must always address it from the spiritual. And, you've had quite, the interesting thing about your experience, is that the warfare has not just been you. It's almost like as though your children too were woken to it. And then the good thing was that it was almost like as though it wasn't always just rushing to the pastor. You learned to war spiritually. You took the tools, prayers, the books, my books, other books I had recommended, and then you started to pray in your house and teach your children to pray. They are now, how are your children now?
I think now they are, I can't, like, sometimes I'm like, God, are you trying to bypass me? They are on fire. They understand the spiritual realm. They know what to do when they see things. They know what to pray. They know to go to fast. I mean, so many things have happened after that never came to your table, because we kind of understand through what you've,
Taught.
You've taught and how you've grown us so far, how to deal with those things. And I just see them also helping other people and talking about these things. I think for me, one of the things I would say is the fact that they didn't just witness it, but they wanted to know more. And they took the teaching, the reading, the study, and they keep going. So because they are so familiar now with the supernatural, they know. And I think one thing I want to say is the place that I feel is really a blessing now is they're also aware now of entry points, which you always tell us about. So they are aware when they say something, they're like, no, don't say that, because you don't know, and they are aware of certain actions. So it's like there's just an awareness of
And a
vigilance, like, you have to be careful. Don't do this because it could open you up to this. It could bring this, it could bring that. And straight away when they see things, they talk about it. Let's pray. Let's go into prayer. Yes.
I'm really loving this perspective and what it's bringing, to the table, because, like I said, with the Beneath the Surface podcast, we usually we bring veterans, spiritual veterans, and they talk about their experiences. But I think this is particularly helpful because, I'm bringing ordinary people like our viewers who perhaps have experiences, but, with your stories, these supernatural stories, you've shown us how At one time, you were oppressed, your children were oppressed, but now they are the oppressors. They, and they have become stronger than their enemies. Yeah, let's look at one other experience. I know there are quite a few. There was one where you said you were sleeping, you had a dream, and you saw a personality with horns. Yes. Can you tell us about the account and what happened?
So I was sleeping and I saw a personality with horns bump into me, like it shook me like physically in real
You
life.
felt it.
I felt it, my hand like bumped me. And then I woke up and I started praying. And then all of a sudden my husband then responded and said, and like, what's going on? And I said, I saw this personality. And then he said, oh, I was trying to tell you, I was wrestling with this thing with horns. And I kept wrestling and I couldn't speak. And I was trying to kick you, to push you, but I couldn't because I was wrestling and wrestling. He said, all of a sudden, it just jumped off of me. And I think that's when he could now speak, but it bumped into me and I was praying.
Wow.
So what we both described was exactly the same thing.
This is incredible. Now, I mean, the spirit realm is real. And I tell people that, there are different kinds of dreams. There are, literal dreams. There are symbolic dreams. Then there's a dimension of dreams that I call virtual reality dreams, which are not really dreams, but they are actually encounters. So, but the thing is, you are sleeping, it's actually like a trance. In reality, a personality has come. It could be a demonic spirit, or some kind of spiritual entity. And the peculiar thing about what you just described here was that you thought you were just having a dream. But then what makes it a real encounter was that, both yourself and your husband were in that plane. And I've seen this happen over and over again, where a husband has a dream about a dog chase and then the wife at the same time. And for you, you wrestled with the thing. He was wrestling with it, but then it seemed like the thing bumped into you, but you rose up and began to pray, as it were. Your spirit was strong and was able to address the thing and dealt with it. Who knows what would have happened if, for want of a better word, the Bible talks about being watchmen, and as in Ezekiel 33 says, when you see the sword coming, and this says a lot about us being spiritually sensitive, number one, and having, so I call it prophetic precision, and also having supernatural or spiritual strength to be able to deal with what is presented. I mean, from our conversation, it's very evident by the grace of God that, your spirit has been awoken, and by God's grace, from being around people of prayer and being in a prophetic atmosphere, in a sense, your spirit is also sensitive and trained, not just to deal with your own affairs. You've been able to raise your children as such. Okay, yes, concerning this, your experience, of the personality in your dream that, came with horns. I remember, around the same time, we had a breakthrough night or something, and I remember you coming to tell me just before the program that your daughter had a strange dream where she saw this personality coming with horns, and I just told you to stop. Because before I came for the program, the Lord had shown me, a personality coming with horns, and He told me the name of the personality. And He told me that whoever, that when I get to the service, He will show me who the person is, and I should deal with that thing. And so is it not interesting that, you had this experience in conjunction at the same time with your husband, yeah? So you had that experience. Your daughter also had this experience where this thing came against her, again showing that it was a familiar spirit, yeah? The Bible actually talks about the fact in Zechariah chapter 1 verse 17, it says, and the Lord opened the eyes of Zechariah and he saw horns. And he said, what have these horns come to do? These are the horns that came to scatter Judah, Jerusalem, and Israel, so that no one will lift up his head. And so you have horns that are arsenaled against families, you know, some against tribes, some against nations. And in this instance, it was your family. But the most interesting thing about it is that the Lord revealed it to your pastor. So, I mean, this, when the Bible says in Ephesians 6, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. One translation actually says, Derek Prince puts it this way, he says, personalities without bodies. Now, what I want to bring out here is that it says we, which means spiritual warfare is not supposed to be fought alone. Okay? And, you know, we will have some individual battles. This is why it's important to be a part of a church, a local church, be under a pastor. And, you know, again, from your experience, we see that, you know, as a family, you are dealing with things together. And this, the Bible says, one will put 1,000 to flight, two will put 10,000 to flight. So you have that advantage, you know, that as a family, you're able to pray together and deal with these things. And I can almost say that after this, we're going to have you again because you keep having these encounters, and it is, you know, my prayer that not only will you continue to succeed and have victory and overcome, but you will continually help other people surmount their own battles. Well, so we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you for sharing your supernatural story.
You're welcome.